teeth and shake a tail fin. A bikini babe, catching a roadway. A big surprise, I'm gonna rise and flash my tooth cane. All the buff dudes, safe on the beach food. They're gonna need a bigger boat and barrels real soon. I'm a sea king, a CGI thing. I'm here to eat and bare my teeth and shake a tail fin. I'm lonely, taking a ride. Lured in by the bucket and shove. It's one weakness I can't hide. Take me to your bucket and shove.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Bucket of Chum. We are in the final week of Mega Mayhem, which lands us right with Mega Shark vs. Kolossus from 2014 or 2015, depending on where you look, directed by Christopher Ray. So, director Christopher Ray has returned from Mega Shark vs. Crocosaurus for the final installment of Mega Mayhem. Let's just go ahead and let's dive into the Letterboxd plot synopsis. Nature's deadliest creature against man's deadliest weapon. In search of a new energy source, Russia accidentally reawakens the Kolossus, a giant robot doomsday device from the Cold War. At the same time, a new megashark appears, threatening global security. Pretty basic plot, and I don't even think it's 100% accurate per se, but that doesn't really matter. It has an average rating of 2.2 stars on Letterboxd. I don't remember what last week's movie was rated, but I think it was also like a little bit higher. I have a lot of expectations when an Asylum movie is rated like a little bit higher than normal. The only actor I really recognized from the cast list was Ileana Douglas. She's been in a lot of TV, a lot of bit parts here and there, but she was in Stir of Echoes with Kevin Bacon. She was in Cape Fear as well, the remake. And she's also the granddaughter of Melvin Douglas, who was a big film star in like the 40s and 50s. I think his last credit is Ghost Story from 1981, but he has 115 credits to his name. So he's done a lot, or he did a lot. So yeah, this is his granddaughter, and she was also in Casino with Robert De Niro and all that. Great movie if you haven't seen it. But yeah, so I definitely recognized her at least. But other than that, there's nobody else I really recognized. The writer Edwin DeRuyter also wrote Two-Headed Shark Attack. So yeah, there's lots to live up to with that one, especially after how much I enjoyed last week's movie. And I should also mention Edwin DeRuyter shows up as Spencer in this movie as well. And he doesn't do too bad of a job, I should say. Let's see if this movie can live up to its name, and let's bask in the shadow of the Colossus and dive in. We start off with a news report, and this movie takes place a year after the last megashark attack, and the world's economy hasn't recovered. The whole world is basically in a state of unrest. Countries are arguing and fighting, and there's like this global phobia of water. So like there's no ships like delivering goods and whatnot. Why we can't just... I know it's a lot to use planes, but if there's like a phobia of the water, like just start using planes and whatnot. Like, there's ways around this, people, and you're just making it more difficult than it has to be. Oh, but right, that's what humans do because we're fucking stupid. Mayhem! The U.S. military has deployed some sonic devices as like a defense in case another megashark shows up. So they're like these like sonic buoys or something like that. They call it like a grid or fence, whatever. It doesn't really work in the end, so I'm not going to go too much into it because it doesn't matter. And then Russia is accused of mining rare minerals illegally in other nations to find this thing called red mercury. I don't know if this is a real thing or not. I kind of feel like it's not, but it is like a big crux of this movie, this red mercury that Russia is looking for. I guess it's like this new miracle energy source, so it's just really good at powering shit, which we know that they had access to before, so why they weren't... It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm taking the two seriously. Again, I gotta stop this. And then we go to Rio de Janeiro, and we see a helicopter lowering some buoy into the water, so they're setting up more of this defense system that they were talking about. And then we see a couple of small submarines, both piloted by very busty women in black leather outfits. I somehow don't think this is like U.S. military attire. Maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt it. And these small subs are called unicorns, and they're designed essentially just for hunting down the mega shark. The chopper and the subs come into contact with some Russian trawler, and they tell them to leave before they like blow them out of the water. And then we see that they have a drill in the water, so they're drilling for minerals and whatnot. And then they basically come clean to this admiral that's on the chopper. Like, yeah, we're mining for stuff. We don't know what Moscow is doing with it. And then one of the commanders is like, yeah, they're just civilians. Like, they don't know what they're doing. So the admiral is like, head to the nearest port and we won't blow you out of the water. But if you deviate, we will sink your ship or just fucking kill you, basically. Guys, last week, AI. This week, tensions with Russia. Like, did the Mega Shark series kind of predict the future? I hope somebody takes like just that sound clip and then just runs a whole fucking conspiracy theory with it. That would be incredible. I don't believe that, by the way, so just for evidence that I don't believe that shit. And I mean, if it does predict our current world, we'll never know until after the nuclear winter. And then we see a shark egg break loose after this drill. So whatever... this actually doesn't make a whole lot of sense why the drill set this thing loose, because we'll find out later that the last mega shark from the last movie laid all of these eggs, apparently. But, so why this drill... It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And then the Russian trawler crashes into this buoy thing that the chopper is setting up. And then this somehow knocks out, like, power to the chopper. It doesn't crash or anything, but it knocks out, like, its systems. Insane. Terribly set up system, whatever this is. And then when they reboot, they see the mega shark on the sonar, and everyone fucking panics. The admiral yells at the commander to get the buoys online to deter the shark, and the chopper flies off, but the buoys aren't working. See, just like I fucking said, so that's why I didn't get into it. The sexy unicorn subs ask permission to intercept, and they are granted permission. They start following the shark and shooting torpedoes at it. They lose the shark on sonar, of course, and it comes out of the debris and attacks one of the subs, and somehow manages to hit it out of the water and into that big Jesus statue that's in Brazil. Fucking hilarious. The other sub tries to attack, but the shark fucks the sub up, and the pilot is bleeding, and she looks behind her, and her co-pilot is knocked out, or possibly dead, I'm not really sure. And she gets the sub back online, and she attaches herself to the shark, she says, but it's like she's just following it really closely, so maybe it's just on like autopilot or some shit. And then she activates her self-destruct in an attempt to kill the shark, and the shark starts diving. She explodes, but obviously it doesn't do anything to the shark, so sacrifice was pointless, basically, sorry, but awkward. And now we're in Ukraine in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and we're with like two different mercenary groups, and there's two leaders bantering. One of them is Benedict, and he's the one that's at this facility that they just arrived at. And then the other leader is like, they arrived in a Jeep or something, and one of the people they have with them is King. And so Benedict starts like flirting with her, and like they just start bantering back and forth. And then they head inside of this small building, and there's this fucking giant steel door there. So Benedict opens it, and they walk in, and it's like this big underground facility, and it's stored with red mercury. So they're here to buy red mercury or something. And we get a little bit of backstory with Benedict. Basically, I guess he was in the military, but he likes making money too much or some shit like that. Again, it doesn't really matter all that much. And as they're inside, we can see Colossus kind of in the background in a corner, starting to slowly power up, and nobody else really notices yet. And so we get a kind of a glimpse at it, and it's kind of cool looking so far. And then over the radio, we hear someone say King's name, and she starts radioing like, oh, Control, come in, or whatever. And so it turns out that she is with the CIA. We only know this because when her and her like ex-boss now start fighting, he's like, you're with CIA, and then they just like start karate fighting. So that's how we know she's with the CIA right now. And then later we'll see her in a CIA building, but why he just assumed she was CIA, I don't really know. Like, she could have been with somebody else, but anyways. She ends up shooting this pipe of liquid nitrogen or whatever, and the boss guy, his arm is like holding a gun right near it, and then it starts freezing and his arm starts falling off. I think they're trying to imply that like the rest of them kind of froze too, but we don't really see it. It's a little cool. We don't see much, but I mean, it's still kind of funny. So there's that. So King ends up escaping, and then we see Colossus bust through the roof of this building, and then he starts walking around, and he sees Benedict and fucking stomps on him. So he's dead. King radios in like, hey, Control, we have a really big problem. Oh, hilarious, because the robot is so big. And the I should tell you, the Colossus kind of looks like, it kind of looks like a Titan from Attack on Titan, that anime show, where those like big giant people, because it looks like it has like red muscle stuff. I don't know that it is. I think it might just be like synthetic rubber or some shit like that. I don't know. But I don't think it's necessarily muscle tissue, but that's what it looks like. So it looks really fucking cool. Again, this is the Asylum, so you don't expect like Pacific Rim type CG here, but it's still pretty fucking cool. It's a good time. We go to some naval base in Florida, and Dr. Allison Gray, played by Ileana Douglas, runs onto an elevator where she's harassed by this other doctor that's in there, Dr. Bullock. And then she leaves the elevator, and then all of them end up in this conference room together, and we see Admiral Jackson sitting at the head of the table, and he asks everyone, like, what they know about the shark and what they can do to kill it or what have you. And then Allison suggests that the last shark laid an egg because some sharks asexually reproduce or whatever, which is fine. But in the last movie, they spent so much fucking time telling us that, like, this shark needed to find a mate or whatever. I'm like, when did it have time to lay eggs when it couldn't find a mate? Like that, it doesn't track, but it doesn't have to make sense. Just enjoy it. I'm just going to enjoy it. It's funny. It is funny. I'll give them that. So yeah, this shark is like the little baby of the shark from Mecha Shark. It's too bad like Mecha Shark and Mega Shark didn't have a baby and fuck like I wanted them to, because then we could have ended up with like this weird hybrid shark, but missed opportunity there. But yeah, anyways, it's all too convoluted, and this meeting is interrupted by someone saying like, oh, the Mega Shark's been spotted somewhere, and the Admiral's like, oh my god, put it on screen. And so we see it from the point of view of these fighter jets, and then the Admiral says like, fire upon the ship, and they're like, well, there's civilians there, and he's like, well, they're either gonna drown or get eaten by the shark. This way we're giving them mercy. Maybe. And so after the jet fires a bunch of missiles at it, there's like, oh, no sign of the shark. It's been destroyed. The same mistake they make in every movie. They're like, oh, well, we can't see it, so it must be dead. That makes no sense. No sense whatsoever, especially with how many times. Like, could we not send a memo? A simple memo that says, we need visual confirmation of the shark being dead, meaning we need to see, like, a carcass, blood, meat. Not just be like, well, I can't see it anymore, so I guess it's just non-existent. That makes no sense whatsoever. I'm sorry. That's one thing that bothers me. I'm moving on. We're moving on from it. And so after that, Allison wants to basically capture the shark because she believes that the ecosystem might need the megalodon, but also in trying to destroy it, they're also really destroying ecosystems. Which makes sense. I mean, they're firing so many missiles and, like, attempting to use nuclear weapons and whatnot. So I kind of understand that aspect of it. I'm like, maybe we don't need to keep these sharks because they're literally just killing everything. And, oh, right, I just remember when I said earlier about the planes, I just remembered that this shark grabs planes out of the water for no reason. Yeah. Yeah, no, this world's fucked. It's completely fucked. And she just wants to keep these sharks lying around. This series is The Meg. It's just a low-budget The Meg series before The Meg was ever a movie, which is insane. So anyways, the Admiral invites this Dr. Bullock onto his ship and dismisses Allison, saying, like, you can go home. And so, like, she's leaving the base all, like, huffy-puffy, and then she gets a phone call, and then this car pulls up, and it's like, yeah, come with us if you want to, like, help with this, or I guess he says something like, oh, you knew that they were going to destroy the shark and you want to save it. And she's like, yeah. And then he's like, well, come with me. And so she just gets into this car after receiving this, like, ominous phone call. Ladies, if you get an ominous phone call, even if it's exactly, like, the type of shit you think you want to hear, don't get into a strange car, maybe. That's just my advice. Again, I am not an expert, but I'm just going with my instinct and saying that you shouldn't get in the fucking car. At some CIA building, King is being chewed out by her boss for missing out on the Red Mercury, and she keeps asking, like, what are we going to do about Colossus? And her boss is like, we'll worry about him when he steps on, like, friendly territory. Like, they know that what this thing is, presumably. Maybe not her right now, but he should. And, I don't know. It just seems kind of stupid. Like, why wouldn't you at least be like, hey, world, maybe we shouldn't let this thing be walking around? I don't know. I'm crazy like that. I guess I just want people to get along and work together and shit. I'm a weird dude that way, though. And so anyways, they argue, and she ends up getting suspended from work, and then she sees a file on his desk marked, like, Project Kolossus, and then the guy who put the file together for him. So she leaves and goes and finds him and dismisses everybody else in the room that he's in. It says, like, tell me about Kolossus. And so he tells all about Kolossus and how it's, like, this military program, and it's built to, like, explode 1,000 times over or something. And I guess it's powered by red mercury again. So apparently they've had access to red mercury for years, the Russians, and now all of a sudden, I guess because it was in Chernobyl or something. I don't know. It's so convoluted. It really doesn't matter. And while that's going on, Allison arrives somewhere. We don't really know where yet. And she's met by Joshua Dane, who's a big millionaire business owner. And he basically agrees with Allison that they need to capture the Megalodon, and they can learn how to defend against them in the future and how to better protect the ecosystem and whatnot. Again, this is just the Meg. This guy is just like any other big businessman from one of the two Meg movies. Like, pick one. And then Dane is giving Allison a tour of this, like, fancy-ass ship that they're now on. He's basically built it to defend against the mega shark, so it's almost like undetectable to it in some sense. He goes into a lot of details. I'm not going to do that. And then we go back with Admiral Jackson and Bullock, and they're talking on some ship, and they're laying out chum to lure the shark. And then Allison and Dane are listening in on their communication systems, and Dane says it's time to see if her device works. And so she's designed some sort of electromagnetic field generator, which I guess helps, like, lure the shark away. Sure. Well, we're just going to go with that. And then she radios into the Admiral that she can help and, like, help limit the damage to civilians and some of the Navy ships and whatnot. But the Admiral just basically ignores her, and then he gets on, like, some PA or radio and tells all the civilian boats and people near the shore to only listen to him and don't listen to any other civilians, and basically telling her to, like, get the fuck out of there. So yeah, this is going to go super well. And then we see Agent King flying some, like, small jet, not like a fighter jet, like little passenger jet, and she's brought Spencer along with her, and she's flying over restricted airspace, and I think they're in Spain or something, and then this fighter pilot radios her to leave, but she just says, like, oh well, and then just keeps flying. And then the shark surfaces near the fleet, and then disappears, but then suddenly rams into a ship that goes flying across the ocean, and the ships start firing on the shark, but the commander says the shark is moving too fast to target. The fighter jet tells King she's on her own, she can go near the shark if she wants, more or less. And then the shark is hit by a torpedo, and then it uses its tail to just flick it up into the sky, and of course hits King's jet, which comes crashing down into the water. And then we go back to Ukraine, and Kolossus is walking around destroying a village with a giant laser. So again, this is one of those scenes that the Asylum does, which I feel like they didn't do as much in last week's movie again, but now they're back to it with just these random scenes. And it was kind of cool. Like, we get to see the robot a little bit, but I wanted to see, like, more of the destruction that it does. I just feel like they could have played it off a little bit better. King wakes up, and she's on Dane's ship, and Allison comes into the room, and then she tries to help her, and King tries to go for her gun, and Allison's like, no, just let me help you. And she looks at her shoulder and says, like, oh, it's dislocated, let me get some gauze and wrap it for you. And King is just like, no, it's fine. And then she goes over to the wall and, like, does the whole, like, relocating her shoulder thing. Gross. I fucking hate it when people do that in movies. I can't imagine doing that myself. Like, if I had to, I probably could, but, like, I can't imagine how much that would really fucking hurt. And then King just grabs her gun and walks off, and then Allison is like, oh, well, I guess I'm following you. And I'm like, Allison, like, this, you're sort of in charge here. What are you doing? And so as they're leaving, they run into Spencer, and then they all head to the bridge, and King tells them who she's with, like, with the CIA, And they kind of doubt it, and then Spencer's like, yeah, we're kind of like off the books, which is true because they're not sanctioned to be doing any of this shit. And then she tells him about Kolossus, and then Dane immediately knows like who she's looking for. So they're looking for this Dr. Abramoff, basically the dude who designed the Kolossus. And they figure if they can find him, then they can find a way to disable the robot. And apparently Russia is just like tearing apart villages, like looking for this guy. And then Spencer somehow comes to the conclusion that Kolossus is headed for Romania because that's where the doctor was originally from. And so King and Spencer take a chopper from Dane's ship and fly off for Romania. We go on to the Admiral's ship. The commander says her and some others are finding Bullock's plan and methods like objectionable, and then he just dismisses her. Jackson gives Bullock shit, but he points out to the Admiral, he's like, yeah, I told you I would get the shark to come to you. Like, you have to do the rest. Like, you need to kill it. Which the Admiral's like, yeah, well, okay, that's fair. And it's like, good point. And then he just walks off. Like, this Admiral's terrible. He is so fucking bad at his job. It's unbelievable. So we see this shark, the mega shark, start following the chum, and they've rigged a whale with explosives, I guess, which the shark flips onto the deck of a boat, and it explodes and destroys that boat, and then it hits up a bunch of other boats, and the Admiral is just kind of looking on, and there's like really not much emotion going on in his face. I don't know if he's trying to emote something and it's just not coming out, but it kind of just feels like he's just looking out at the water to me, with like kind of a squint on his face because it's sunny out. But other than that, he doesn't really seem all that concerned. And then we see him and Bullock on a nearby beach looking at dead soldiers that have washed up on the shore. And then Allison and Dane arrive and try to convince the Admiral and Bullock to try their method, but it doesn't work. And then Allison ends up slapping Bullock in the face. This Admiral is like every bad manager I've ever had, where they're like, oh, well, if I didn't think of it, then we're not going to fucking do it. So, like, she's coming up with plans to make things better, but because it's not his idea, they're not going to do it. Like, oh, God, people are so fucking stupid. We see King and Spencer arrive in Romania and start searching an abandoned village, which was supposed to be a farm that the doctor grew up on. And so Spencer is like, okay, well, I kind of, like, recognize the layout, so, like, this is where this would be, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, the house should be here, and it's, like, an old diner or whatever. And then an old man comes in and holds him at gunpoint, and they ask if he's Dr. Abramoff, but he denies it, and, like, even though he has all these, like, science papers lying around or whatever. And then Spencer gets him to let his guard down and then basically admit that, like, he's Dr. Abramoff without actually saying it. And then he describes himself as Oppenheimer. Again, for the second time in this series, somebody describes themselves as Oppenheimer. Except this time, it actually makes sense because he created a weapon of mass destruction. Unlike the first time where it's like, I saw a big octopus and shark fighting. I'm like Oppenheimer. No, no. This makes sense. This actually makes sense. And then Abramoff says if they believe he is the man who created the Colossus, then they know that he deserves to die. And then he gives some backstory on making the machine and his regrets, and about some girl he lost. And then we also learn, like, they basically buried the machine because they couldn't destroy it, and they basically just hoped it wouldn't wake up one day. Wow, great plan, guys. King reassures Abramoff that she wants to disable Colossus and not use it, and if he helps her, she'll put a bullet in his head if that's what he really wants. And then he says he thinks there's a way, and then some grenade comes in through the door, and then a bunch of, like, soldiers burst in. One of them shoots Abramoff right in the chest, and then King takes out the rest. She's a total badass in this movie. Like, she takes him out no fucking problem. And then Spencer tries to help Abramoff, who gives him this locket that he's carrying and says there must be a way, or like Anya is the key, something like that. And then he dies. And then King takes off with Spencer as Colossus approaches the city. And as they fly off, the robot like starts glowing right in the middle of its chest. And then I guess just blows up, destroying the village. And when they do describe this robot like earlier, they do say it has enough power to destroy itself a bunch of times. So I guess like it is just a walking bomb, but it's not like destroyed when shit blows up because it's super strong or something. I think that's sort of what they're going with here. So we're just going to go with that. It's fine. It's a cool looking robot. I'm totally fine with this. We go back to Dane's fancy ship, and he tells Allison that Jackson is getting ready for another assault on the shark. And then Allison and Dane argue back and forth because she just wants to tell the Admiral that they'll do whatever he wants. And then she kind of argues like, hey, if Mother Nature needs another Megalodon, it'll give us one. It'll find a way. Life will find a way. But I guess when she came on the boat, her and Dane agreed that she would be in charge. So he's basically like, yeah, no, we're just going to do whatever you say then. And so he just goes with it. So she contacts the Admiral and says they'll lure him and the Admiral can kill the shark. That's their basic plan. They're like, yeah, we'll lure it and then you can kill it. Which, listen, even if Bullock is a dick, the whole plan was to just lure the shark and then the Navy kills it. The Navy has not come up with a plan to kill the shark other than firing fucking missiles and torpedoes at it, which in, now that this is 4 fucking movies, that has not worked. Like, unless you have it bite down on one on the inside or some shit. Because what happened in the first one? The first one, the giant shark and octopus killed each other, supposedly. But then I guess the shark comes back in the second movie. And then how did it die? What was the second one? Was it Crocosaurus? Yeah, it's Crocosaurus, and they just fall into a fucking volcano. And then Mecha Shark, it bites down on a torpedo, so it gets a torpedo on the inside, which makes sense. And now this one, they're just like, yeah, we're just gonna keep fucking shooting at it, and hopefully something happens because America. Like, seriously, what's your plan here? You have nothing. And, like, the Admiral's like, yeah, well, I've got access to nukes now, so like we could try that. And I'm just like, guys, I'm like, have we not already tried this before too? And it still didn't work. One of them actually swallowed a nuclear submarine and was doing just fine. Oh my god, the worst admiral ever. He should not be in fucking charge of anything. I wouldn't put this man in charge of a fucking McDonald's, let alone a naval fleet. Like, my god. Somebody is getting fired, and not just him. Whoever hired him, and then whoever hired that person, like, they all need to be fired. So Allison pilots the ship, and she uses her EMF fields to, like, steer the shark towards the middle of the fleet. And then the ship starts firing on it, or all the ships start firing on it. And then the EMF fields, like, start to fail as the Admiral's screaming, like, more, more, more. And, again, I don't really know if he's, like, telling Allison like more EMF fields or like more bullets and torpedoes. I don't know. He's just yelling more, 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 and then they're cutting to Allison. So I'm like, okay. And I guess we are supposed to assume that she like overrun these generators, so that's why it failed. But yeah, shockingly, their conventional weapons didn't kill the shark. I mean, who could have seen it coming, guys? I certainly couldn't have. My goodness. Like, if only they had encountered these things in the past and learned how to kill them in other ways. How weird. So the shark escapes, and the Admiral is pissed. So he takes Bullock and another soldier into the computer room, and then they're both, like, looking at the Admiral as he's standing away from them, holding a gun, like, kind of shaking. And then he turns around and shoots the soldier, and then he tells Bullock to stand guard. Like, oh my god, what is happening right now? Jackson tries to get access to the computer, and it's like, no, you can't. But then he's like, okay, executive override, blah, blah, blah. And then he gets on the PA, and then he tells everybody to prepare for, I think he says Trident missile for launch, and the target is Mega Shark. So he actually says Mega Shark. Like, we could have just said, like, the Meg, or like, I don't know. I'm glad he said Mega Shark. I'm actually happy that he said it because it's so stupid, but it's also fantastic. I do enjoy it. And then Bullock asks, like, what has he done? And then, like, Jackson responds, like, whatever needs to be done so it can't be undone. And then he turns the gun on himself and shoots himself in the head. So this Admiral is unstable as fuck, and I think maybe they should start having, like semi-annual, like, mental health checks, maybe psych evaluations or something, because goddamn, dude, like, you went from 0 to 150 in like a split second. It's like, well, nukes, boom, dead. And also, you're basically like right where the shark is. So like you would have just died in the nukes anyways. Like what? Or I guess he shot himself so they couldn't make him override the system. But like, again, it's just pure nonsense. So after Bullock sees this, he's like, I was only in this for the money, and then he runs off. And then the ship's commander finds Jackson's body, and she contacts Dane and says, like, they need to get away from the area within 5 minutes because the whole place is going to be nuked. Dane and Allison come up with a plan to stop the missile, and then Allison takes some device off the, like, a bottom of one of the consoles in the ship, and she's like, oh, I'll buy you some time. I don't know how, but they don't explain it. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to take this and then buy you time, and then explain nothing to us. That's pretty lazy filmmaking, but it's also just kind of funny because, like, there's just so much random nonsense that, I mean, if you kind of just go with it, it is pretty funny in a way. And then Dane manages to hack the ship's systems and make the commander in charge, so that way she can discharge the missiles. And she manages to do that, so they just end up exploding in the sky, and nothing bad happens. Yay! Allison lures the shark into an inlet, saying, like, she can't stop her boat, and then the ships fire toward the inlet, trapping the shark in, like, this little area. And, like, I don't know why they thought this was going to work. We've seen this shark, like, jump into the fucking stratosphere, so, like, why wouldn't it just jump over? Like, they didn't even create, like, a big obstacle for it to have to get around or over. Like, Free Willy, no problem. Free Willy is flying over this, like, little rock pile 100 times, doing it just for fun, not even to escape anything. And yet the mega shark is like, oh my, I'm just trapped, I gotta swim in circles. And so King's helicopter comes flying in and manages to grab Allison before the shark grabs her and the boat. And then King asks the commander to deal with the Colossus now that the shark has been dealt with. But then the commander is like, yeah, all the nations that, like, kind of surround this area aren't really happy that we've kind of trapped the shark and almost nuked them. So yeah, we're keeping the president apprised of the situation on Colossus. Oh yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you so much. King starts asking Spencer about Colossus, and he is just, like, in a crisis because the doctor told him, like, Anya is the key or whatever, and he's like, I have no idea what it means. I can't figure it out. And then after a while, they figure out that this locket that Abramoff gave Spencer is pointing to where Abramoff first made red mercury. So I guess you have to make red mercury. You can't just find it. And that's why they were going for rare minerals, because they need this to create red mercury. We're going to go with that. It's too complicated, and it doesn't matter. Why am I thinking so much about this? I don't know. It's just stuck in my head. Red mercury. It sounds cool, but it's just so convoluted. And so they find where this place is, and it ends up being underwater. And King jokingly says, like, oh, well, unless you have a sub on board, we can't get down there. And then Dane's like, well, I do, but it's pretty small. And so then they come up with a plan to distract Colossus. So King gets into the chopper, and then she opens up the back, and there's this ginormous American flag sticking out the back as she's flying. And it's, like, I guess supposed to distract Colossus. And so it does start following her. And then the mega shark jumps out of the water, because remember, it can jump super fucking high, and rips the flag off and sends the helicopter crashing. And then King manages to escape by parachuting out. And then as the shark is trying to eat her, the flag comes back down on top of the shark, basically blinding it. And then Dane manages to, like, put the ship under her and get her back on board. Colossus is now underwater, and with 20 minutes left, the shark and the robot finally fight. Jesus. Dane, Allison, Spencer, and King get in the sub, and they head down to the lab. Everyone starts searching the lab for, like, some controller Abramoff made to control Colossus, I guess. I think he said, like, with the prototype, like, I had this, like, controller thing. And, yeah, so that's what they're looking for. But then, like, the radiation levels start getting super high, and then they finally find what they're looking for, which is this typewriter-looking thing that it's supposed to control Colossus. And then they head back to the sub as the station starts to flood because, like, Mega Shark and Colossus are fighting outside and banging into the side of it. As they're escaping, the shark starts to follow them, but then Colossus comes in and kind of saves the day a little bit for them. And then Colossus grabs onto the shark's tail, and he swings it around underwater, and then ends up throwing him onto I thought it was land, but I didn't really see that much land, so it was like maybe like a sandbar or something like that. He's not like fully on land. He's still pretty close to the water, but he still is a fish out of water. Oh, fuck. I'm sorry. They get back to the ship, and then Colossus starts headed for the ship as well, and it's about to destroy it, but then they turn the controller on and manage to get it under control. Everyone starts celebrating, and Dane starts like taking King's gun and then holds everyone hostage. We didn't need this. We don't need this. This is too much. But anyways, yeah, he's holding everybody hostage, and then he takes control of Colossus for himself. And then the robot opens up its chest and gives Dane one of the fuel cells because he's like controlling it with like these like gloves and glasses, I guess. And then he puts it in the boat, and then he says like this is his master plan to control the sea and the land. So he needs this red mercury to control the shark somehow. So I guess like when he took one of those fuel cells or whatever, it's for this device to control the shark. We get no explanation as to how or why this is supposed to work, but we're just like, he's just like, this is going to control the shark. And we're like, okay, good enough for me. And so his whole plan, or his plan the whole time, was to get red mercury, but getting Colossus was like just a bonus for him. So I'm not, I don't know. I have no explanation as to like exactly why this is happening. We certainly don't need this in the movie, but anyways, he says he's going to make a phone call, and then he starts appearing on, like, screens all over the world, like, outside in, like, city centers and all that kind of nonsense, like Times Square. They don't show Times Square. They probably couldn't afford that stock footage, but you get the idea. He tells everybody he has control of the Mega Shark and the Colossus, and he controls the sea and the land, and some people will have to die in order to save the world. Again, I'm not entirely sure what his entire plan is here, other than he's just insane. Like, you're already rich and control so much. Like, why are you so fucking crazy? Like, who hurt you? You need a hug? I'll give you a hug if that will fucking stop this nonsense. And so some fighter jets come in, and then we get some, like, just A+ acting from Dane here. He's walking down the hallway controlling the sharks with his glasses and gloves, and he's like, surf, turf, let's play. And this is delivered just so poorly. Like, but I don't know how you would even deliver this in a way that would be even mildly great. But yeah, that's what happens. And so the shark and Colossus are taking out ships left and right as Dane is controlling them, knocking them out of the sky or whatever. And then the commander of the Navy ship tells the fleet to stand down, and they're deploying the big gun. So this satellite starts revving up in space, and Dane is like, oh, well, we can't have that. And so he takes Colossus, which grabs the shark, swings it around, throws it into the atmosphere, knocking this satellite off course, and then it starts shooting a laser at the moon, which we can see cutting into it. And then the shark comes crashing back down. Like, just insane. Absolutely wild. So the whole time, this military has had access to this giant fucking laser, and they're just deciding, like, now is the time? What about when you had the shark corralled in the middle of the fleet? You could have aimed that laser right in the fucking middle and hit it. Game over. Oh my god. Idiots. But when the shark comes down, the red mercury device that Dane's been using to control it comes dislodged from its back. And then back where all the prisoners are, King manages to break everyone free by basically dislocating or breaking Spencer's thumb. And she's like, it's really important that you don't cry right now. And he's like, what? And then she goes, snap, and he cries out. And then she ends up, like, taking out a bunch of the guards and whatnot. Again, just being, like, a total fucking badass. And so they start making their way through the ship. And then right outside, like, Colossus and Mega Shark have, like, started fighting. And, like, Mega Shark is holding up his own, taking on Colossus pretty fucking good. Dane loses control of the robot, and it fires on the ship. So he makes it to shore, and then Colossus stomps on him. Perfect ending, for him anyways. And then the other four wash up on shore as the shark and robot fight. And then Colossus grabs the shark, holds it tight as they start sinking to the bottom of the ocean, and then it lights up and explodes. And we don't really see much else from our heroes. They just kind of leave. They kind of say like 2 lines, which weren't that important. And like that was kind of it. But then I sat through the credits, and we see a Mega Shark egg hatching, and then a little teaser line that says Mega Shark will return. It's been like 9 or 10 years, and I haven't seen Mega Shark return. I'm just saying. I mean, other than there's this other movie they have called Armageddon 2025, I think it's called. I think it's also called like Monsterverse or Monsternado, maybe, which basically just has like all of the Asylum monsters in it. From what I've read, though, like Kolossus shows up, but it's just like footage from this movie thrown in. But yeah, well, there hasn't been another Mega Shark movie. That was so far the end of the series. I think they've done other movies with Megs, but not this series. A little disappointing. But yeah, this has a lot of Asylum nonsense in it, as they always do, just like those random scenes and whatnot. But like overall, the Colossus design was super dope. I liked it. Some of the CGI, like when the Colossus and the shark were fighting, was actually pretty good. I wish we had more of that, because I'm kind of disappointed that they waited till the last 20 minutes, because that's been pretty much my complaint about most of these movies, is like nothing's fighting until like the very end, which I guess is typical, but I feel like with these like lower B budget movies, like we want more of the fighting. We want more of like the kaiju style fights. That's what we're here for with these movies. At least that's what I'm here for. The acting, I'm not going to lie, was not super great. It was pretty bad in a lot of places. The woman who played King was decent, and so was Spencer, the screenwriter. The rest were, for the most part, felt like very over the top or not interested whatsoever. And it just didn't mix well. Or maybe the director didn't really know what kind of tone he was going for with this movie. Like, I feel like maybe they should have just leaned into the absurdity and comedy a bit more. But I don't know. It's hard to say. So it just, I don't know. Something about it didn't match up, and it just felt kind of weird. Again, the shark design was super cool, because they basically just reused it from the last movie, but which is fine. Nothing wrong with that, because if it works, it works. I think overall, I'm going to give it 2 stars, because it's better than the first one. It's not better than Mecha Shark for sure, but it's still an enjoyable watch. I would definitely watch Mecha Shark and Colossus. I'd probably rewatch those 2. Maybe Crocosaurus, because that one was enjoyable. I don't know. I might have to like kind of like sit back and let these wash over me once more to see how I really feel. But I don't know. Overall, pretty good time, and I think each movie kind of improved upon certain things. Like this movie, the CGI for certain things was better than in other movies, so there was at least that. There was other things it didn't improve upon, but that's fine. But yeah, that concludes Mega Mayhem. So that was the Asylum's Mega Shark series. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I actually had a good time watching these movies. You can find pretty much all these on YouTube. You can just type them in and you can find them. Maybe I'll actually try to throw some links in the descriptions, but if not, just look it on YouTube. There's a few channels that have licensed them, so you can watch them there for free. But don't forget, the Mega Mayhem continues over on Patreon, where I am covering crabs from 2021, I believe. One of my all-time favorite creature features, and I even told the director that he didn't message me, sorry. He commented on one of my posts, and I told him that. And I'm hoping, I asked him, like, are we getting a sequel? And there was no response. So, maybe we can get a sequel in the future. But yeah, if you want to hear me talk about that movie, go over to patreon.com/bucketofchum. Every month we do an exclusive episode over there. There's a newsletter, more fun stuff like that. And you can always follow me on all the social medias. That's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Slasher, all at Bucket of Chum Podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, if you could hit that like and subscribe button, I would really appreciate it. And as always, I will see you guys next time for more Bucket of Chum.